Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me for this presentation. And the topic is about dairy markets and outlook and how the future will look like. I structured the presentation in 4 elements. I'd like to first introduce the IFCN. Then I would like to talk about global dairy trends. Then I would talk about the outlook. And then I'd like to sum up. And, the summary of my presentation are 2 numbers. 60 and 40. If you remember that, you have understood everything in my presentation. The identity of IFCN, it's a global research network for dairy economic and consultancy. I've developed that out of a kind of Federal Agricultural Research Center in Germany. We are now associated to University Kiel, but we are a private entity. And the mission is very simple: to help people in the dairy world to make better decisions. The network has gradually, the last 20 years, evolved, and we have now built a network of researchers, economists participating in the knowledge creation. Then we have a network of agribusiness companies, and Adiseo joined last year. Congratulations, welcome to the group, and thanks for the support of our work. And we have a team of around 20 people in the headquarters coordinating the work. And probably with that, we are the largest applied dairy economic research center in the world. There might be some large milk processors who probably have a bigger team than us, but we are relatively good. This is a group of kind of companies which are a member of IFCN and financing our research, and you see among them all major milk processors are there. A lot of the feed additive companies are there. Health companies are there. Barn equipment companies are there. Banks are there. Genetic companies are there. And what I found very interesting is all of these companies do business with the dairy farmer. All of these companies want to know where the business, the dairy world, is in 10 years, because that would decide where their company is. And we put these people once a year together, facilitate them with knowledge, and try to act as a think tank for the global dairy world. If you are not a member yet and you want to be enlightened by our knowledge like Adiseo is, please contact me. You are very welcome, and to support our work. Now let's go into research results. By the way, I have also taken some of these maps with me. This is a summary of our work, and this map is usually a summary of a book we write about the dairy world once a year, 200 pages. That's the shortest way we can do it. Good, let's talk about prices. I like this chart: 40 years, crude oil prices, feed prices, milk price. Feed price, we just mix corn and soybean meal, 70-30%, and with that we get a kind of a price indicator. And you see that basically we had a level shift about 15 years ago. Since then the world is not the same anymore. And oil is there, feed has increased, and milk had also a tremendous level shift on that one. The blue line is now 20 years backwards, and the interesting thing is, when we do outlook work, put yourself in the shoes of being back in the year 2000. What have you seen how the world looked like? What have you not seen? How do you prepare? There's always a continuous search on that one. In the new world, we have much higher commodity prices, and with that we have much higher volatility. And if you manage volatility well, you are definitely a winner in this industry. If we look on the feed prices, that's quite interesting. Feed prices are exceptionally low. And for me, as a researcher in dairy economics, it's always a question: how long will these feed prices stay that low? Because this is a driver for everything what we do in dairy in terms of feeding system, economics, milk prices, etc., etc. So that's a 40-year story. Now let's have a look on a 20-year story. And the good news is, in the last 20 years, and this now I come to my 60% story, in the last 20 years we have been growing milk production globally by 60%. Who in the room is now in the dairy business more than 20 years? Congratulations, you have been part of that. 60% more milk on that planet in 20 years, 300 million tons. This is about 15 times New Zealand. Demand-wise, we have been adding 1.6 billion people, so half of the growth was coming from more people, and the other half was coming from people drinking more milk. And on another side, very simple, we added more cows on the planet, around 78 million. This is around probably 10 times the US herd population. And the world average milk yield currently is 2.3 tons or 5,000 pounds. And we have been increasing gradually, but we grow stronger by more cows. We have been adding, what you probably don't know, we were adding around 20 million additional dairy farms on this planet. And with that, dairy production, transportation, processing provides livelihood to 1 billion people on this planet. So their livestock, dairy has probably the biggest social footprint in the planet. And we have doubled global dairy trade. So this is in a nutshell the dairy world the last 20 years. And you might ask yourself, where has the growth happened? Where has the milk production growth happened? Green countries are growing, red countries are declining, and the bigger the bullet is in green, the bigger the milk volume is. And at the moment, the biggest growth of milk production happened in India with a 2-cow farming model. Why? It was cost competitive, provides value for the farmers, for the consumers, and the model was working. Then we had China. China was also growing like that, and the growth was coming from crop farmers putting 5 cows in the backyard. Now, since moving into progressive farms, they're not growing anymore. They're just replacing the small farms with large farms. So, gold medal goes on to India, silver medal to the United States, and China, and then you have a category 3 countries. Bronze medal is EU, Brazil, and probably Pakistan, New Zealand. Interestingly, countries like Australia move backwards. Water challenges coming in there and some other drivers. And Russia moving backward due to the transition in the political system. So what are the key drivers for production? And you mentioned that you want to be cost competitive and you want to make the farmers more cost competitive. We are tracking since 20 years costs of milk production in different countries. This is a survey we are doing in 50 countries based on what we call average size farms. Once a country is green, costs are low. Once a country is red, costs are high. Once the costs are in the gray zone, you are in the middle of the competitive range. Western part of the US, very interesting. Whenever feed prices are low, California, Idaho, very competitive, and as competitive as New Zealand. Latin America, competitive, but the cost leaders at the moment, South Africa, low yields farming systems in Africa, and Belarus, Ukraine, and at the moment, Lithuania. Cost leaders on the upper side, Japan, Canada, Norway, but China is also on that area. Cost of production have a tremendous dynamic. And what we are doing here, you see in the lines, it's a dynamic of cost of milk production in US dollar per 100 kg milk. And let's start with this line. This is New Zealand. New Zealand was in the year 2000 by far the cost leader in milk production, and they have increased their milk production cost by factor 4. Then in the last crisis, they moved back with their farming systems, cut costs, etc., moved back to more grazing, less substitute, and try to do that. So, farming system was a key driver, currency, of course, is another driver, land prices is another driver, but there are a lot of dynamics in there. And this is a cost chart of an American 500 cow farm type, which we are tracking. Stable cost, with feed price increasing, costs have been increasing. Now with feed prices going down in the last years, feed prices are dropping. And this is a chart of a German farm. In the beginning, it was a 60 cow farm. Now it has been grown as an average northern German farm with 150 cows. And there was a time of rapid increase of cost, mainly driven by currency movements and non-adjustments in the quota system. And once we now move out of quota, these farmers are able to grow. Costs are coming down towards a level a little bit higher right now than in New Zealand or than a 500 cow Wisconsin farm. And the last one is the most interesting one. This is a 20-cow dairy farm in India. Was a cost leader similar like New Zealand, but has also a similar pattern like we see in most emerging market countries, tropical countries, that over time costs rise rapidly. And if farms need help, these farms definitely need your help. Second driver, Robert, you asked me on that to talk about milk supply by farm size groups, and this is a key driver to understand milk supply change or the dairy sector. And we have categorized the dairy world into 3 types of farms. There are farms, let's start with the blue ones. Blue ones have about 1 to 10 cows per farm. Household farms, most of the milk is consumed on the farm, informal markets, etc., etc. That's household farms, that's blue. The second one is green. Green, what we call family farms, and family farms because family members do the major part of the work. And that goes between 10 and 100. In some cases, it could also go beyond 100. But the main driver is generating income for the farming families. And then we have the orange and red farms, what we call business farms. The main driver is that there the work is done by employees, and having a sufficient ROE and cash flow is a key element. And what we have done now, we have segmented, looked at the farm structure statistics, and what you found, for example, in South Asia, around 90% of the cows are in farms in the blue segments. So this is an area completely dominated by household farms. Then you go in the US, where the dark red, so the farms with more than 1,000 cows, completely dominate the sector. And then you have all the other markets in between, which are partially green, partially blue, and partially red. So this is a status quo analysis. And please don't understand me wrong. It does not mean that a red farm is cost competitive and a blue farm is bad. Sometimes it's really the opposite. And it's depending on the structure of the country and its development. So in India currently we have the small farms because they are more cost competitive than the 500 cow farm at the moment. So let's have a look on the dynamics, and let's look into Ireland, because Ireland is a fascinating growth country in Europe in milk production, and I've chosen in here the chart. The red line is the growth of milk yield. Well done, Ireland. Second driver for growth is adding cows, for around 300,000 cows on that one. The orange line is a growth of the average herd size, moving from 30 in 1996 now to almost hundreds. And of course, the farm numbers have dropped from 40,000 to 15,000. Usually in our developed countries, we know that farm numbers go down by 5 to 10% every year, so that is a pattern. But what's much more important is the segment of growth by size category. And you see here, for example, in Ireland, the blue segment, this is the segment of very small farms. It's not there in Ireland. It's gone already because we have only green farms, and the green farms are the farms between here and 20 and 100 cows. But they are constantly declining, and nothing can stop such a trend of small farms going out, except you cut salaries in that country by 50%. Then you would stop farm structure change. So what happens? Cows move out of this segment, and we have been moving around 600,000 cows into the larger size category. And the average rate of growth of a milk production farm which stays in business in Europe and US is 8%. Every farm who stays in business grows 8% per year in additional milk production. So the farms who stay in business are almost double-digit growth companies which need substantial support and high-tech systems. What you see in Ireland at the moment, the 500-plus cows are not existent. At the moment, the system, large-scale system, does not fit, or no one has made it work. So 2 drivers on milk production growth on that one. Now let's go to the outlook, and let's start with the easy one, the 2040 outlook. Yeah. Please consider, how old will you be in 2040? Well, I will be 75. There's a chance that I will be here, that you can invite me again and we check. But the chance that you remember that I was here was not that strong. So that's a very safe forecast, what I'm doing. Nevertheless, this is now important for strategic thinking. And once you do such a long outlook, the most important thing is to consider what are the biggest impactful and biggest uncertain drivers. And the first one is the demand perception of consumers for dairy fat and dairy protein. It can be strong, and they like dairy fat more than plant fat. And that happened with the Eat More Butter strategy. We have been increasing the butter consumption tremendously, so we have been moving this direction in the past 5 years. But it could be also that the more dairy-free diets win, that we have technical progress, that we reduce food waste, etc., then you would be on the opposite of this growth driver. So this is the uncertainty number one, and the uncertainty number two is policy, GDP growth, open trade, and peace. I just recently got a very interesting number. 70% of world's population live on less than $10 a day. So GDP growth drives consumption. So if you make the spread here, you have basically three scenarios. You have a pro-dairy scenario, where we continue the growth story of dairy like we did in the past. We have a rich and picky scenario where the people have the money to buy dairy, but they choose for something else for whatever reason. Then we have the income restricted. The people like to eat dairy, but they don't have the money for it. And we can have the stagnation scenario where both things come in. And whenever you develop a company strategy, better look on these things and define a plan A for your most likely scenario and a plan B for the other one. I tell you that the rich and picky is probably the one for all developed countries with a relatively high chance to come. We have been working on the pro-dairy because we are optimists and we think that the dairy industry could make their homework, and then the story would look like that. 45% additional milk produced and consumed. 400 million tons, about 3 times the EU, or now 4 times America as milk production, or around 20 times New Zealand. 1.7 billion more people, and we add a little bit the per capita consumption, and to a level of 140 liters. 140 liters means, in milk equivalent, you drink milk, you eat cheese, butter, etc., and we turned all that back in milk equivalent. And 140 liter is basically a little bit more than a glass per day. The Europeans consume almost 300. Yeah. So that is the demand side. Production side, we still think that we will add cows on the planet, because I have not seen any major significant program which is targeting efficiency growth from our world average farm, moving it substantially in developing countries from around 2,500 liters substantially upwards. So that's a 2040 scenario. We have a database for every country in here, but that's a presentation by itself. Now let's go into a 2020 outlook. Robert, you asked me to talk about more the short-term thing. That helps you to make your budget. And let's have a look on the milk prices. Currently, you see all the lines. These are the major milk prices for dairy products: cheese, whey, whole milk powder, skim milk powder, butter. And you see they somehow fluctuate together. 2 points which we need to know. 2007 was a level shift where their price almost doubled. And 2016 was the year where fat was suddenly much more valuable in a dairy product than protein. We have been breeding animals for less fat and high protein for 25 years, and suddenly the fat is the king and the protein is the leftover, interestingly. I'm not sure how long that lasts, but the driver for that was basically the consumer perception towards fat, butter fat compared to margarine. So what we are doing to make this as an easy indicator to relate to a farm gate price, we turn all these commodity prices in something what we call world market price of milk. So the red line represents a price in 100 kg US dollar per 100 kg milk, solid corrected milk, 4% fat, 3.3% protein, which a processor could pay if he sells products on the world market at that price. And then what you see, I put here on the right for you on euro terms what the current euro values are on that one. The world market price has been for a very long time beyond $40. So that it represents right now around 36 euro cent, or 30 to 36, or $17 per hundredweight if you make an American sense. But this has been dropped now the last 3-4 years to a level of 35 dollar cents, which is at the moment really a little bit painful for the US dairy industry. And what you also have seen that we have in the last 3 years a very unusual stability of prices with very little fluctuation, because usually you have a fluctuation of plus minus 50% about the mean in these cycles. So that's where we are today. I see a lot of you are from different countries. What you could do, this milk price is published on our website. You can have a look and relate your national milk price with that price, and you will see that in almost all countries the milk price in your country will fluctuate in a similar manner than the world market price. The only thing, there will be a little bit of a delay function. If you look here in the US, it took around 6 months unless the world market price can be transformed to the national farmers' milk prices. There's another interesting story on the US. Currently, the US price is substantially higher than the world market price. A little bit risky scenario unless the world market price is rising. If you look on Germany or UK, at the moment milk in Europe is 20% cheaper than in US. That's very good for European cheese exports. It's very bad for American cheese export in there. Let's have a look on China. In China was a country where the milk price is continuously already $60 in here. And $60 is somehow what European farmers would call heaven, because it's bigger than 50 euros per 100 kg of milk. And here the government policy supports that price level, and without that support, all the large-scale farms, 3,000, 5,000 cow units, would not be able to survive. So, milk supply drives mainly the price fluctuations. I will skip that slide, it's a technical slide, but I like to talk now a little bit about data and fat and protein. This is the milk production growth of the United States on natural content. You see normal growth 2%, and currently you see milk production growth almost to 0. Farm economics was not great, so we are in that range. Interestingly, what we found, and probably your products had an impact on that one, continuous rise in fat content and continuous rise in protein content. Well done. Congratulations. We see a similar trends in some European countries as well. But if you then measure the milk production growth in solid corrected milk, because fat and protein really counts, you see that the milk supply in US is still relatively strong and have not been slowed down. So the way we are trying to tackle supply growth is we monitor the world market price for milk. We monitor the world market price for feed. This is mixed, this blend of corn and soybean meal. We calculate the margin over compound feed cost, just assuming a farmer feeds 300 gram compound feed per kg milk. And then we put an average in here, and then we classify whether the farm economics is good or bad. And then we relate that to milk supply growth. And it's just a matter of time once price signal, margin signals get transformed into more or less supply. So let's have a look. The normal growth rate of milk supply is 2 to 3%. 2014, record farm economics lead a little bit later into record supply. And the same, we have record low margins, which later on lead us to low supply. Right now, we are a little bit in a way that supply is extremely weak and margins are still relatively good. This is a special situation. And the special situation comes out of a number of countries which are definitely declining in milk supply. Ukraine, Uruguay, Argentina, Colombia, Turkey, Norway, Algeria, Sweden, Japan, China, etc., etc. So there are some really countries moving backwards. Now you're interested in the outlook. And the outlook we do in a very simple way. We look on the butter prices in the 3 key markets, US, CME, European EX price and NZX price. And you see the butter price US a little high, New Zealand a little bit low, but still on a much higher level. And you see here the S&P prices, and all the S&P prices are very much aligned. And you see here, this is the ex-post prices, this is the forward prices. And these prices we can transform into a payout price per kg milk. You see here, this is the old price range from 17 to 19 of $35. And you see here the green line, this is a forward traded price in Europe, and now the forward traded price indicates the payout price in Europe moving up to 36 euro cents. It's a very good price, right? So we have been much lower, but we are moving upwards. US is even higher, and New Zealand is also very high. So at the moment, the future markets indicate a very, very good scenario. Why? Supply is low, stocks are low, and demand is still growing, and probably the milk alternatives had not kicked that in as the noise is on the market. So let me sum up. The past 20 years, remember my 60% story, a lot of more milk, more farms, more cows, more people, more trade, main growth in emerging market countries, small farms dominating and gaining market share. The outlook of the dairy industry is in the hand of the dairy industry. If the dairy industry is gaining its license to operate and acceptance from society for what they do, there is a very, very great opportunity to grow, and 45% or even growth level more than we have seen in the last 20 years. 2020, milk supply is low, like 2009, 2013, 2016, and future market price indicate a rise in prices, and we support this thing. So once again, what has Torsten Hemme said? Very simple, 60% more milk, and we are moving to a $40 milk price level, or 36 euro per 100 kg milk. This presentation was possible due to a collaboration of a lot of people, which I would like to briefly acknowledge. Thank you very much.